Greetings, Kindred. I am Voivode Maquette, and welcome back to My World of Darkness and another episode of the Thicker Than Water recap. This is the second episode of the second season, and I guess I'll just tell you what happened, because it was pretty crazy. First thing, Gabriel. Gabriel is how we started off the evening. We had him eventually get all of the texts. Basically, what we ended up doing was saying that he was either in a no-cell zone or a crappy reception or whatever, but it took him a while to actually get the actual text that had been sent to him. And, well, when he got them, one of the texts was directly from Tinia telling him, as a ranking member of the Cult of Mithras, he needed to let them know that the Sabbat were in town and that they were probably going to end up laying siege to the city and that they needed to be well aware. So when Gabriel goes to the Cult of Mithras, he found the front gate open. He found the front door open. He found debris, leaves, dirt, stuff like that through the threshold. The doors had been left open for a very, very long time. Gabriel had searched the entire Cult of Mithras chapter house until he was able to find Alexander Thorne kneeling in a puddle of his own blood, with blood stains running down his face as he had been crying, in front of the altar in the Mytharium. A wound on his head showing where he had slammed his head against the altar out of frustration, mumbling to himself in Latin. When Gabriel was finally able to get Alexander to tell him what exactly had happened, he told him that Mithras had come back, that Mithras had used him as a vessel. Mithras had left him completely hollow, empty. He told them that the Kindred known as Ronan, who was sent by Pater Tomnus, was in fact Pater Tomnus himself. That he had come to see what Mithras had been up to. That he had come to collect the relics from the Mytharium. That the only one left since Victor Loretta's betrayal was in fact himself. While trying to get answers from him, eventually Alexander freaked out and frenzied on Gabriel, but he was weak. He had no blood left in his system whatsoever. And Gabriel had realized that it was time to return this elder to the cult back to the greater number, and he sank his fangs into the Ventru. Without thinking about it, he diablerized him. And the body of Alexander Thorne crumbled in his arms, decaying rapidly, catching up to its normal state that it would have been in if it had died instead of becoming an immortal. Gabriel was filled with Thorne's thoughts, his desires, and realized that there had been a note left for him on the table. And when he turned to look at it, it was just a note from Yolanda Porter, Alexander's broodmate, his sister, if you will, telling him that once he had regained his senses, that he should contact her. But Alexander would not be contacting her anymore. Alexander Thorne is now part of Gabriel. Gabriel did his duty because the Cult of Mithras diablerizes their elders when they're done, so that their knowledge can continue along into the younger members. He went throughout the chapter house of the Cult of Mithras and he locked up. Made sure all the windows were shut, all the doors were shut, everything was locked up and protected, leaving the house vacant. He called back Tinia, and we will get back to that phone call in just a few minutes. Because as this is all happening, this took place during the events of last game session, where The Sabbat attack was running rampant, where the hospital was being burnt to the ground, where the coterie was dealing with the situation with Brittany, where they had gone to the Elysium and ended up fighting the fleshy collective clutch ghouls that they ended up fighting in the Elysium. And now we are back in the Ecstasy Lounge's basement, where the coterie, consisting of Sam, Tinia, the Prince, and the Baron, were now standing at the foot of the stairs with Noah Masters, the La Sombra, going by the name Maestro in this Sabbat pack, who was staring down at them and said, "Well, I'll be damned," and encased them in a Stygian shroud. A little bit of chaos rang free on this one. Tinia wanting to get everybody out of there. Sam trying his best to keep his cool. The Prince and the Baron trying to formulate plans on how to handle things. But Tinia grabs the first person she can, which happens to be Sam, who grabs the next person, who happens to be Merrick. And as Tinia tries to launch them back through the door to get back down the ladder to lead back into the Shanghai tunnels, she ends up slamming Sam into the wall. And there's some laughter happening by the Sabbat pack, but Justin Murphy, who's a member of this Sabbat pack, asks how long this is going to happen. How long they're going to be doing this. They're not enjoying it as much, but they also don't have as much invested in the torturing of this coterie as the rest of them do. Maestro drops the Stygian shroud, allows them to see what's going on, and conversation takes place. Justin goes down and starts trying to discuss things with Tinia, back and forth. Maestro says that there's nothing keeping them there, and is proven right on his thought that the coterie would abandon each other as Sam rushes down the stairs and runs down the Shanghai tunnels. The Maestro screaming, "We'll be going on a whale hunt later, Jonah." Jonah Wales being the name that Sam went by in Sun City, Florida. His old pack member Noah, the Maestro, feeling that abandonment, feeling justified in everything that he's doing due to the fact that Sam has yet again left. As Justin is downstairs debating the ethical position between the Sabbat, the Camarilla, and the Anarchs with Tinia, and the leaders of the Anarchs and the Camarilla, the Prince and the Baron, still trying to debate exactly how they're going to handle this, biding their time to find out what exactly they're going to be dealing with. Maestro decides that he's going to go wake up Dawn. Dawn, who is laying unconscious and prone on one of the overstuffed velvety couches in the Ecstasy Lounge's main bar room. To set the scene, what we have as the Maestro leans over Dawn, telling her that it's time to wake up, calling her Sunshine, we have Omen, as they're calling him, Damien, Axel, whatever name you really want to call this La Sombra, sitting at the bar, cleaning his gun. As Dawn opens her eyes, he's menacingly pointing at her, checking the sight. We've got about a dozen workers from the Ecstasy that have been kept alive all this time on cheap fast food, half naked in a corner, crying, wanting to be let free. This has been nothing but torture for them. Treble, or Vinny, as he was called before he became Sabbat, behind the bar, pretending to be a bartender. And Requiem, whose name was Terry before her embrace. off to the side, just watching everything unfold, obsessed with the concept of who's going to die and how they're going to die. Understanding through her precognition powers that someone is going to die tonight, but not exactly knowing who it is. In the VIP booth in this room also sits someone else, not part of the coterie, not part of the Camarilla, not part of the Sabbat pack. Elena Zantoza, the Seraphim who this pack works with. As all this is going on, Tinia ends up getting that phone call from Gabriel as time catches up. He lets her know everything that's going on, and she lets him know everything that's going on. They are currently in the middle of a hostage situation, and as the pack realizes exactly who is on the phone, they start screaming, "Come on, Gabby, come join us. There's room for you too." Gabriel's pack, the Archangels, another Sabbat pack who followed the path of Cathari, but a specialized version of the path of Cathari. They followed the path of night. This pack, the Choir, also follows path of Cathari. They both work under Elena Zantoza, the Seraphim, who's based in Seattle. This pack, the Choir, they have rotating membership. Most packs do. You have to understand that there's such a high death rate. The oldest member of this pack currently is Justin Murphy. Not only through Embrace, but also being members of the Sabbat and also being members of this pack, because Noah, or Maestro, Terry and Vinny, or Treble and Requiem, these are all newer members. Their first hurrah in this pack was actually to kill off the majority of the Guardian Angels in games of instinct, under the influence, under the orders of this Seraphim, to find out which pack was going to be better, because she did not want her honor guard, as she sees this pack, to be worthless. So she pitted these two ruthless groups against each other, as Seraphim tend to do from time to time, to make sure that she has the right individuals for the job. The Choir beat out the Archangels, and Gabriel is the only one left. Now, throughout the rest of the night, until he arrives at the Ecstasy Lounge, Gabriel himself is listening to everything that's happening on his cell phone as he travels. But things do get a little insane. As Rose comes to, Noah is delighted to let her know. The Maestro is delighted to let her know that Sam has abandoned her, just as they had abandoned him. You see, not too long ago, before they came to Sun City, I guess this is verging on 2 years at this point, they were all one big happy coterie. They were all just a happy coterie in Sun City, Florida. They were embraced on the same night. At least that's what the Maestro believes. Not realizing that Dawn actually had been embraced for quite some time before. She's the oldest member of this coterie. She was thrown into this neonate situation, and the curiosity of how they were going to live, what was going to happen to them, really did just keep her interested on things. She had no intentions to harm them or anything. She just was lying about her identity. They believed that she was a follower of Set, or a ministry member. Now, to be fair, she also believes that she was a follower of Set. Dawn, for all intents and purposes, is a follower of Set. Her sire is Hesha Ruhats. He embraced her. He drained the life from her. He gave her his blood to turn her into a kindred, making her a follower of Set, a member of the ministry. However, she was embraced under the circumstances of an experiment. She volunteered to be embraced under these circumstances, and she's not exactly what you would call a typical ministry member, because after her embrace and after some prepping and education, she was a mortal member of the ministry. She was a member of the Setite cult that many humans and other clan members are actually part of. But after her embrace, Hesha gave her the blood that he had collected from Calcutta after the storm of 1999, where the thin ropes of living vampiric vitae coated the ground after the destruction of Zapathasura. Dawn is reborn as Ravno, as she drank the blood of the third generation Ravno antediluvian that completely rewrote her clan and what she was. This is why there's so much confusion. She is a follower of Set, but the consumption of the Ravno antediluvian's blood has turned her into a Ravno. And those voices in her head that she's always attributed to Set or to her own god, Loki, however you want to view whatever trickster divinity she follows, is actually the voice of Zapathasura, telling her what to do. Her urges to diablerize are Zapathasura. She is completely bloodbound to the antediluvian of Clan Ravno. And I understand I'm laying this on thick, but it really is the complete essence of everything that's going on with Dawn and what exactly is wrong with her. She ends up going downstairs to find Tinia speaking with Justin, listening to everything that they're talking about, having a few things. Well, Noah just goes on and on and on about the abandonment that she and Sam had given him as he disappeared and they left for Portland, Oregon. When they found where he was, they went to get him, found him, had seen him with their own eyes, laid their own hands on him, were about to rescue him, and then abandoned him again for whatever reason. That is what's going on in the Maestro's mind. Abandonment and betrayal. That is why this pack is so obsessed with getting back at them. Because you have to understand that although Noah, the Maestro, is a Lasombra, members of the pack, the chorus, had embraced his retainers to separate him from his mortal touchstones. Requiem was Terry. Terry was his manager of his nightclub, the Velvet Rope, back in Sun City, Florida. Now, if you've ever been to Sun City, Florida, I just want to let you know, out of character, it's not a bustling metropolis. We set it up to look more like a New Orleans downtown area, where in reality it's just a couple of buildings, a community center, and way too much golf cart parking. But the idea of this fictional Sun City is what we were running off of. Terry was the manager and main bartender of the Velvet Rope, and now she stands as a Hecata. In reality, I guess you could say, since she's Sabat, a harbinger of skulls, obsessed with the concept of death but pleasure as being a member of the Path of Cathari. Vinny, on the other hand, or Treble as he is now known, was embraced by a Banu Hakim anti-tribute, and he is just reveling in what he can do to a physical body when he decides to destroy it, which he always reveled in. He was a psychopath before his embrace. I've based, and I know I said this in the last video, but I based their relationship off of that of Roman Sionis and Victor Zsasz from the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie that came out a couple of years ago, and their avatars are as such because their relationship was just so interesting. They're evil people in that movie, and truthfully, they're evil people in this pack, but the concept of their relationship is just so endearing to me because there's this, I don't know, there's just this this love for each other, this familial bond of needing to make sure, specifically through Victor, or Vinny in this case, the need to make sure that their boss is well taken care of. And I wanted to have that shine through in this. Have that overeager appreciation. This just hetero life mates in a way. This love beyond life and death through these sociopaths that just made the whole experience just that much more disturbing. So while this is all going on, they finally talk the Kindred that are downstairs into coming upstairs into the main bar area. Justin decides they want food, and I believe that's actually what drew them out. And after asking, is it going to disturb the Kindred if I eat something? And Noah mocking Justin, because why do you care? They're vampires. And the concept of anarchs being synonymous with the word hypocrite being a thing, because they're not taking action for what they want to do, which is to overthrow the Camarilla, which in this city they've had opportunity after opportunity to actually do. So Justin feeds off of one of the ecstasy workers. Damien also feeds to the point where the person passes out. And as Dawn is coming back upstairs with the rest of them and realizes that they're hungry too, she only sees one individual who's sleeping. It happens to be the person that Damien just fed off of. So she goes to drink and kills her, killing a damsel in distress. And protection of a damsel in distress is one of her convictions. She realizes that she's ruined things for herself, just as she's feels already tonight that she's ruined Brittany's life, that she's hurting more damsels than she's saving. And things are just going badly. It's such an interesting night. I mean, I really don't know where else to go on that one, just with how insane things have actually gone with this evening. Sam at this point has decided that he's going to go return to his car to find Brittany and try to regroup and figure out what they're doing next. And as he gets to the parking garage by the Benson Hotel, he finds the car that he has with the back seat open, little speckles of blood and vomit all over the place. He can't find either Brittany or Brittany 2.0. He pulls out one of his spare cell phones and starts trying to get a hold of his AI, starts trying to get a hold of Brittany 2.0. And he realizes that she's there. He can hear her beeping. He can hear her trying to communicate. And she's under the car. And she's wrecked. Her entire frame has been destroyed. She's still alive, if you can call it that. But she's broken. The other Brittany has stopped her from being able to function properly and has run away. The original Brittany has bested 2.0, at least in combat, and has run. Checking clinics and the like, looking for Brittany to see what she would have done, but to no avail. Sam is unable to find her and is unfortunately out of commission for the rest of the night. He does not take part in anything else. The night takes a deadly turn now. The strange thing between all of this is that as all of the stress is happening throughout the night, Justin is just laying the groundworks for survival. It is the most interesting thing that I've seen as a storyteller, because it's no secret that Justin is part of this pack at this point, that Justin is part of the orchestration of all of the torture and the trauma that these people are going through. But they're just sitting there having a conversation with Tinia through most of the night, discussing the finer points of etiquette and ethics, and just it's so amazing, because as the maestro is directing conversation topics also towards these people, primarily trying to psychologically torture Dawn as much as possible, explaining how Sam abandoned and they abandoned, and the whole freaking coterie does nothing but abandon each other. Justin's sitting there talking about just behaving civilly. And it ends up in a very interesting conclusion later on. Which is actually kind of funny because in the middle of the conversation, as they're actually discussing how things went down in the Elysium with the clutch ghouls, and how the Maestro had to like pull a whole bunch of favors to even get those things, and it's amazing they lasted as long as they did because they die so quickly. If they stop eating, they just die. And he's just impressed with his own handiwork. He stops and looks at the two of them who are having the civil discussion and just goes, "Are you guys trauma bonding? Are you?" And they start getting into the concept of Stockholm Syndrome and things like that. And the funny part about that whole mess is the fact that Noah Masters, before he became this like big Sun City crime boss, was a psych major in college. And he starts talking. He's like almost giving them therapeutic advice as they're talking about this. So this Sabat pack is sitting there talking about trauma bonds and therapeutic ways of handling such things. And they're causing the problem, but they're also discussing the psychological ways of making things better. Which just makes things worse when you stop to think about it. Because Treble and Requiem are just sitting in the background laughing at this entire thing. But as now they're all upstairs, there's another conversation happening in the background that the players have no idea about. And that's Elena Zantoza, Billy Smith, and James Merrick are all sitting at the VIP booth, sharing drinks and catching up over the last century that they really haven't been able to spend time together. Because Elena Zantoza was a Zantoza revenant that belonged to the Tzimisce, who was trying to get their talons embedded into this society in the 1880s, back when the city was first being built from the ground up. James Merrick was the child of the prince back then, who was just a young member of a coterie eventually known as the Boys Club that was trying to change the way things were, and eventually were responsible for chasing the Tzimisce and Elena out of the city, making her lose the Ecstasy Saloon as it was back then. And then there's Billy Smith, who's still a young pup neonate. He was embraced in the 1920s, and he's still trying to understand all of what's going on and taking in all of the information from Elena Zantoza and his successor, the Anarch Baron, who was Prince. It's a lot, dude. Like, I'm losing the ability to talk about this because while all this stuff is going on with the player characters, I'm actually trying to figure out what's going on between these NPCs. Because my game runs off of what the city is doing and how the players react to it, and then how the city itself reacts to the players. So all this little conversation between everybody is happening. Conversation between the younger members of the city turns a little darker as the taunting of Dawn by the Maestro turns a little darker, and he's like, "Well, I've been torturing you all night. What can I do to make up for it?" And Dawn just kind of looks at him and says, "What do you mean?" He's like, No, seriously, I've broken your Brittany, I've done all this stuff. What can I do to make for it? What can I do? Obviously, you're interested in the idea of Diablerie, so pick your flavor. Prince or Baron? Who would you choose? And she points over at Damien and says, if I have to choose anybody, it would actually be Damien. But as soon as she says that, Billy Smith stands up, leaves his conversation, turns around and says, Dawn, if we get out of this alive, but you've Diablerized him, you are not getting out of this alive. At which point, she goes, well, the prince is starting to sound like a lot better of an option to me then. And then the joke of a turducken shows up. What happens if we make the prince Diablerize Damien? And then... and Damien is just justified with his thought that like his coterie is out to kill him, that Maestro was 100% right. And while all this is happening, Merrick is just he's got one tall empty glass, one whiskey glass. He looks over to the group, swigs the whiskey, swishes it around in his mouth, spits it out, and says, "I don't care. Do whatever you want. The city's a hole anyway." He's pretty much given up at this point. The conversation actually takes an interesting turn at this point also, when the Maestro walks up to Tinny and hands her a piece of paper and says, "Here's a gift for you." And when she unfolds it, she finds an interesting symbol. And he tells her that this symbol is a gift. That it's one of the first clan symbols. That it is the first clan symbol on record. And she asks exactly what it is. And he goes, "Oh, well, it's an A." In the Enochian language. In the Enochian language, that's an A. The vampire language, before other writing, that can roughly translate to what an A would be. And it was given to you by a Ventrue. It was given to your clan by Ventrue, and he explains the whole concept of love and loss and betrayal, and how this is what tonight is about. It's all about betrayal and abandonment. She just looks at him confused, asks some questions about the details of it, and he goes on into a long monologue discussing that the Bruja antediluvian was an uncaring monster, and its first child fell in love with it. But it could not reciprocate its love. So eventually it flew off into a wild frenzy and diablerized. And that the Ventrue in legend made the new Bruja leader, the new Bruja elder, kneel. And the reason why the A, the upside down A, which most would just take as an upside down anarchy symbol, actually is a symbol of the amaranth, the name for diablerie. And the reason it's upside down is because when they were kneeling, they branded it into the back of the neck. And that the first clan symbol ever was an upside down A for Clan Bruja, showing that they had diablerized, and now they wear it with pride. And diablerie is just something that is part of their blood. And that betrayal and love and being screwed over by the Ventrue is Bruja history. Not only in the first city when they got their clan symbol, but also in Carthage when they fell in love and they ruled, leaving out the concept of the Bali on this one. But when they had Carthage, the Ventrue came and destroyed them again due to love, and then salted the earth so that nothing can grow. That the Ventrue are built on nothing but destroying what the Bruja have built. And at this point, she was Camarilla, and she switched over to Anarch. And not long after that, the Ventrue prince of the city switched over to Anarch in their perception. In reality, he was an Anarch the entire time. He was playing both sides of the fence. This Ventrue was trying to have everything, controlling all sides. Dawn starts screaming about how the injustice and wants to know the rules on this one. Who, if somebody else diablerizes, are they going to get in trouble, or is it just her going to get in trouble because she's an anarch? And Billy says no, that if anybody diablerizes, it's going to be the same swift punishment on that one, because those are the rules. And you cannot be a vampire without rules. Diablerie is wrong, and that is it. But in this has just gotten very much out of hand. Seeing things getting out of hand at this point, Merrick stands up, stumbles drunkenly, walks over towards Damien, and says, "If anybody's going to do anything, it's going to be between us." And he goes, "This is all my fault. I'm the one who told your sire to embrace you." Damien's eyes fill with rage at that, and he steps forward. "What did you just say?" "I'm the one who told Deacon. We needed another La Sombra in the city." And in that rage, he steps towards Merrick and activates all of his potence, and blind rage goes to swing. But Merrick, who's been egging him on this whole time, says, "Go for it," and activates demontation, forcing him into a compulsion of dominance. And as the fist flies forward, Merrick lets the weight drop from his body and turns, falling to the side. Still standing, but falling over. His specialized brawl skill in Drunken Master, because I'm cheesy as all hell. Merrick is actually, he was a drunk before his embrace, primarily because he had lost his wife in childbirth, but he had never lost the taste for that whiskey, and he had always known how to make it work to his advantage. But as that La Sombra's potent fist flew through the air and the Ventrue ducked, it struck a Bruja in the back of the head. He punched Billy Smith. Now, while all this is going on, the maestro brings forth the final song of this entire adventure as he stands up and he brings a shot glass full of blood over to Tinia and slides it to her across the bar and says, "Right here, right now, I put the offer out." I end up going through Other Side from The Greatest Showman, trying to let her know that this Vaulderie, because this is how this pack does Vaulderie, shots, will help break whatever blood bonds that the Ventrue Baron or the Bruja Prince had put onto her and will set her free. He's not telling her to join the Sabbat, but to break those damn bonds if they exist. And she's just sitting there holding it the entire time, wondering if that is actually the right thing to do. Link to the video for Other Side is in the description. And at least the first portion of it you can see happening with these characters. Billy takes the shot to the back of the head, finishes the whiskey glass full of blood that's in front of him, stands up, slowly turns around and looks at Damien. Slowly takes off his jacket, then starts rolling his sleeves up. "You really want to do this, boy?" And he takes up the classic stance. Probably one of the corniest threats that I've ever said, but still, given who said it, was actually pretty threatening. He looks at Damien and says, "Axel, I'm going to punch you until you look like Damien again." This is where the game takes a turning point, however, as the prince, staring into Damien's eyes, says, "Why exactly are you throwing punches in a small room filled with people, Damien?" Tinia yells, "Some of them human." But Damien's still running through his dominance, and this would prove to be fatal. As he puts his hands in his pockets, he wraps his hand around a black leather book that his sire gave him. A book of dates, a book of names, a book of locations. His other hand gripping onto 3 charred charcoal sticks. As he snaps them in his hands, shadow grows across his and Billy Smith's eyes as he begins to chant in Greek, calling the name of Shalim. The prince is frozen in terror, seeing everything that hell truly is in his mind. And Damien stands there, experiencing the power of this abyssal mysticism, this ceremony of Shalim. And just as the shadows overtake the eyes of the two kindred, Tinia cannot stand to see her broodmate, the prince, in this type of pain. And she is filled with anger that she has never felt before. And she rushes over, finding new strength activating for the very first time Fist of Cain as she aims for Damien's face. And as her fists of Cain made contact, she sprayed in the face with blood. As half of Damien's head implodes under the weight of the massive strength of her bare hands. And Treble had fairly hopped onto the bar, lifted a bar stool, and rammed it through Damien's chest, staking him and exploding half of his head at the exact same time. And he crumbles to the ground, dead. Damien must die, apparently. The chant of the game, really. How long will this Lasombra last? Well, until the second episode of the second season, apparently. Damien crumbles to the ground. His Treble, still crouching on the bar, looks at him like a feral animal and spits on the body. Infernalist. The Sabbat don't take well to Shalamites. The worship of Shalim is considered infernal. The worship of any Methuselah would be considered infernal. But he was displaying magic that the Lasombra chose to leave the Sabbat for, because it does not fit in to that system. Now, Damien was just bait to get to Sam and Dawn. That's true. But this is the first death, the first character death in this game. And it was a shock. And as everybody stands around watching the scene, some of them in shock, some of them disappointed, Dawn, because she didn't have a chance to diablerize him herself. Elena Zantosa stands up and says, "Why don't we all retire to the next room?" And starts walking into the main room of the club. She tells Treble to clean up the mess. Billy Smith walks up to Tinny as she's washing her hands in the bar sink and asks if she's okay. Taking the life of a coterie mate cannot be easy. This was the first time Tinia had ever killed a Kindred. Really killed a Kindred with her own bare hands. And the prince could tell that she was shaken by the ordeal. As the rest of the vampires are retiring to the other room, Treble stands in the center of the room, unbuttons his shirt, and pushes it down his arms, and activates visceral absorption. As a blood leech, he comes prepped with protein. Blood and viscera, bodily remains of both the dead ecstasy worker and Damien, swirl around the room in a vortex as they get slurped into Treble's form. And after a few moments, there's no sign that this event had ever happened. And as he's buttoning up his shirt, he belches and moves on to the next room. Around the same time that they're all going to the other room is the same time that Gabriel finally arrives at the ecstasy. He has now taken bat form and he's flying around looking for an entrance, but everything seems to be shut to him. That is until someone had actually opened the windows for him. Sensors outside had picked up that there was someone floating around, and they were assuming that it was most likely Gabriel. So, Elena Zantosa gave Treble the order to go upstairs and open a window. That way, Gabriel could come inside, which he figured, considering everything that was going on, would probably be a good idea just to go ahead and do that. After he enters, Treble, however, does shut the window, locking him in. And as he enters the main area, which is basically set up like a very large strip club, this was the primary saloon area where the bar had been ripped out, replaced by a stage. 3 bars were placed around the room, and there are just tables everywhere. But it's large. It's a very large open area that he's walking down into, and he can see the choir. He can see the seraphim, and he can see the remaining members of the coterie. As he's walking down the stairs into the main area to join everybody, Dawn is going on about how it's wonderful that Damien has been destroyed, that they no longer have to worry about the drama, his blowing up of cars and things like that. That that the Sabbat Pack has done them all a favor. At this point, the Maestro starts to sweeten the deal for Tinia a little bit more, telling them that the Camarilla has been stockpiling hordes and hordes of lore and interviews with ancient kindred for probably centuries, and that while tracking down Dawn and Sam, he happened upon a gangrel that was able to tell them exactly where they were. Now, tell them, maybe not willingly, but he was able to get it out of them, and that he was able to capture, torture, and kill this gangrel that had actually been the reason why they had come to Portland in the first place, and that this gangrel happened to be in possession of the locations of one of the Nielsen libraries, which now he's offering as just more reason why Tinia needs to trust this pack over the Anarchs and over the Camarilla. He is actually not trying to get her to join the Sabbat, just trying to get her to live freely. A free Bruja who has been scorned by everyone can cause more damage than most other things in this world. He just keeps going on and on praising Tinia for her action killing Damien, about how she's a free thinker and she did what she wanted to do, but if she stops and think about it, she killed a member of her coterie, that she popped up without even thinking about it and popped him open like a piñata, his words, to save the prince from something that she really didn't even know about, and started questioning her if there was no actual blood bond between her and the prince. The prince has been going to her, talking to her, confiding in her, yet she's still Anarch. That she hasn't been manipulated in any way. And he really, really wants to try to get her to free her mind. But that shot glass of blood, that right there, it's being pointed out as unfair. Even Justin is the one who said, you know what, this isn't that fair. What if we all did it? And they enacted a Vauldery for the entire grouping of Kindred in the room, except for Elena. Elena has a strict policy of never doing the Vauldery with her packs, because she wants to remain impartial. She does not want personal affection for her packs. The only time she participates in the Vauldery with members of the packs that work under her is during high holidays, such as the Poly Grand. He even sweetens the pot further, saying that if they participate in this Vauldery, that they will do whatever Tinia tells them to do, shy of killing themselves. That if she participates, if she drinks the blood, they'll kill the prince if they want her to. They'll kill the Anarch Baron if they want her to. They'll kill both of them if they want to. They will do whatever it is that Tinia wants. And the idea is just, it's getting stronger and stronger in their head. And then finally, they decide that they're going to go ahead and participate in an actual Vauldery. And they pull out the mixing glass that they usually shake up the blood in to do the shots. That is their holy relic. That is their item. This mixing glass. And everybody adds a little bit of blood. Everybody except for Elena. And they pass it around and they do the Vauldery. They talk about Cain's glory and peace between the bloods. And the reason why the Sabbat do not call themselves kindred is because the Cainites don't get along, and kindred implies that there is no divide between them. That they are all vampires under Cain and therefore Cainites. He also goes on to talk about how they are truly free as Sabbat. And he pinpoints that directly at Tinia, is that they are not ravening monsters. He shows off about everything that they have done, the violence, the acts, the hideous acts that they've done, but they have not lost themselves to the beast. And that actually catches Tinia's it catches her attention for a second, because they're right. They have done things this night that would cause a vampire to just lose themselves completely to the beast. But they're still sitting there being themselves. That these monsters are being monsters that are controlled. They said that they will frenzy, and when they frenzy, they ride the wave. They pointed in the direction they wanted to go. But the fact of the matter is, they do not lose themselves to the beast because they work in tandem with the beast. Tinia is losing the ability to want to be able to hurt them because they are 100% right. They are in control of their own actions. The beast does not tell them what to do. She's learning things from these people. They might not be people that she trusts. She might not be people that she likes, but she is in fact learning things from these vampires that she never got from the Camarilla, never got from the Anarchs. He admits to her that the Vauldery is not a clean and cut breaking of the blood bonds, that it will break the blood bonds, but it will also leave all of the kindred in the room with a slight fondness for each other. That this one Vauldery that they do is going to shatter the blood bonds, but it will replace it with a minor blood bond for everybody. Putting everybody on equal ground. And they do it. They drink it. Everyone drinks it. Everyone drinks the Vauldery, except for Elena. And that's when Tinia starts saying what they want. But it sounds like they're trying to return things exactly where it was, and there's just no progress in it. So Noah pushes. The maestro pushes it. Because at this point, after the Vauldery, he does not want to see the city fall back into Camarilla hands. He does not want to see the city go back to the Anarchs struggling over the Camarilla, still frickin' there. So it comes up to a compromise. That they want a Baron in the city, but they don't want Merrick. Because with everything that they've learned tonight about Merrick, they do no longer trust him. He has screwed everyone over. He has roundabout caused the death of Damien. But they do want a Baron. But who? No one trusts Colin Griffin anymore. So who? Redclave? No. Everybody thinks he might still be having Sabbat leanings. So they go around the room. Who here should be Baron? Gabriel? No. He's got Sabbat leanings. Dawn? No. She'd line everybody up in the city and diablerize them all one by one. Sam? He abandoned everyone again. The only person who was there who could take the position would be Tinia herself. And a look of fear like I have never seen struck Tinia. She knew that they were all right. That Tinia really was the only person who could actually be the Baron. But she started talking about having it be a place where kindred of all kinds could be. A city where they're not going to go after the Camarilla, where they're not going to go after anyone. And the groundwork that Justin had laid had actually started to take hold, where Justin was even talking about staying in the city. And that got Noah's brain ticking. They'll keep a Sabbat member in the city. They'll keep someone there to spy on the way that this is, and Justin would be perfect for that. But not a secret. They're going to keep Justin there to make sure things are going to plan. That the Camarilla rule has been completely disrupted, and that the Anarchs are not going to allow the Camarilla back in completely. This city will be safe for Camarilla individuals to come through, which means there's going to have to be some kind of diplomat involved. There's going to have to be some kind of emissary for the Camarilla involved. And that's when Billy Smith stands up and says, we've just cleared the slate. There are no blood bonds between anybody. I will submit to a blood bond from you, pointing to Tinia. You be Baron. I will be bloodbound to you. At least temporarily, because blood bonds do wear off over time. I will let the city be run as long as there's a Camarilla emissary in the city to make sure that the masquerade stays intact. That if in need of an emergency, the Camarilla can be notified to police the area. Under the condition that every Anarch in the city attends Cretius's Kindred school in Chicago. For those of you who don't know, there is a school run by an elder Bruja in Chicago for Anarchs and Neonates to learn how Kindred society works. It's a very interesting thing. The Bruja Primogen of Chicago runs a school that teaches vampires how to be vampires without causing problems. And Billy Smith puts down these words again, because you cannot be a vampire without rules. And Tinia agrees. The new ordained Baron of Portland, Oregon, Tinia Jabbar, Bruja, leader of Portland, Oregon, agrees. They will take the time for the Kindred of Portland, Oregon to, on a rotating scale, go to Chicago, go through the courses of Critius. Probably butchering that name, it's Greek. Critius, I don't know. Learn what it is to be a vampire, how to be responsible, and then come back and rule the city, and the Camarilla will literally just walk away. They will give them Portland to keep the Sabbat out of the city. And the Sabbat are amused. Because where Elena Zantosa would love to have the ecstasy back, this was her love child, she created it. She is well set up in Seattle. And this pack does not want to stay here. They have other cities to rampage. And they've already destroyed the spirits. They've made their point that this pack is just going to abandon each other, that they're going to betray each other. They promised Tinia that they would do as Tinia requested. So no killing Dawn tonight, unfortunately. And at that point, after the agreement is done and Billy Smith drinks the new Baron's blood, in a sign of fealty and loyalty to the agreement that they've come up with. Our Sabbat pack leaves with the final words of, "Your seneschal is under the floorboards." They just leave. And I call post with Tinia Jabbar as the Baron of Portland, Oregon. Who would have thought? This is a new territory for me. This is not anything that was ever actually planned out. This happened organically. I knew that the Sabbat pack wanted to come in and torture the hell out of Sam and Dawn. That was literally my only thought process. The fact that they took the ecstasy was really just kind of a spontaneous stroke of luck. The fact that the vampires decided that they were going to go to the ecstasy because it's the most fortified building in the city that they could use was just a stroke of luck. But now all the Kindred are going to be going to Chicago. I'm going to give them... We're basically going to catch up to real time, because right now this is technically the 1st of January. And right now we are at the end of February. So next game is going to be in March. We might actually even take a week, because we're talking about having a vampire movie night for something, because we've got stuff like just to relax, get new characters involved. But that's where things are. Now, just a little background. David Gonzalez, we're actually considering doing an exit interview for his character, so he can come and just jab to you guys about the character. But also, I want to let everybody know that Dawn Rose has left the game. Serendipity is still here. She's going to be making a new character, but she feels that this is at least currently the end of Dawn's story for right now. She feels that she has been abandoned by Sam, and she's lost Brittany, and she doesn't know what to do, and she's going through a bunch of things in her head. She does not know if Dawn is going to rush home to one of her RVs, take it, and just run and travel the way that Ravno do, or if she's going to try to go with Noah and join the Sabbat, start practicing the path of Cathari, and finally have a way to channel her violent tendencies. But also that Valkyrie that they did gave her a moment of clarity. Is it possible for enough Valkyries to dissolve the power that Zapathasura has over her? Because truthfully, it's just a blood bond. A powerful blood bond, but a blood bond nonetheless. Could her meditation techniques that she learned through traveling with that Malkavian caravan, coupled with the ritual of the Valkyrie and Sabbat ethics, help overcome the power of the 3rd generation Ravno? She has been under direct control of an antediluvian, and now with a little bit of clarity knows that it's a good idea to not let that happen. And who else better to teach her than the Sword of Cain? Perhaps Dawn and Noah were reunited, and she has rejoined that coterie, which is now the pack. Perhaps Dawn is part of the choir now. Who knows? We may find out later if Dawn decides to come back, but currently, right now, as per Serendipity, Dawn is shelved. Hopefully we'll see her again. But this also brings us to a wonderful point, is that I want to run my game through all, if not most, of the supplements that are out there, and this gives us the opportunity to run through Chicago by night. So where this will always be thicker than water, the Chronicles of Portland, Oregon, we are going to be taking a little jump across the country to Chicago, and our characters will be running through the Chicago Chronicles. This is not going to be something that I jump into lightly. I want to study this and read this because it's a very in-depth and beautiful story which deals with a lot of important subject matter, such as how the Lasombra joined the Camarilla in the first place. And due to the fact that we've still stayed on the fence throughout all of season 1 of how the Lasombra are actually interacting with the Camarilla, this is something that we can do, because this can be what's considered the end of that trial. The end of what Kevin Jackson in Chicago is putting in place. And we've already had a little bit of experience dealing with this prince. He came in to help put Billy Smith in control. And now Billy Smith is going to be writing to Prince Kevin Jackson to try to make it so that it is okay for the Anarch community of Portland, Oregon to attend the school in Chicago so that they can become proper, well-directed citizens in a way of keeping the Sabbat out of the city. I am Voivode Maquette, and this is my World of Darkness, and I am so excited to see the turn that this story is going on. We now have a brand new player character Baron in the city. We lost Alexander Thorne as the patter, as the newly instated patter of the Cult of Mithras in Portland. And we lost Damien. And we lost Dawn. Dawn may come back, but Damien's not going to. We'll see what Serendipity and David decide to come up with in the next episode of the Thicker Than Water recap. Good evening.